At the beginning of the meeting, we had a motion to move agenda item number 2, to the end of our agenda. That's a review and discussion of proposed sign regulations. I have some ideas that I put down regarding our sign regulations. You can pass them down. And at this time, I'd like to just kind of go through these. We're working towards making a formal proposal if the commission wishes to go that route. So I'd like to kind of go through this list of my observations to date and some suggestions that I've put down and get some feedback from the commission as to which direction they wish to proceed. As you can see, our sign regulations begin at item number 383184, which starts with a finding, a purpose and intent. C is non-commercial signs. I don't see any changes there. D, as noted on the handout I just gave, we might have to make a slight adjustment for that with the real estate signs if we go the route that I suggest a little bit later on. And a couple other slight modifications on down through I. You can see when we get to 383, 185, I have a note there that we may want to improve the definition of a temporary sign, specifically B. And 383, where are we now? Which one was it now? I think I might have that misnoted. So we'll skip that part then. We'll go on to 383 because I don't see where the reference is for it, specifically B, because B displaying a non-commercial message.
Bo, in your existing regulations 186, under C, there is a word windows, which I
yeah, that's different than what I was talking about before. So we will move on to 383, 186 C. As that reads now, it says obstructions. No sign shall be located or maintained so as to be a hazard to traffic or pedestrians, to obstruct any door, window, ventilation system, or fire escape or exit, to cause any other hazard to public health and safety. We haven't banned window signs in the past. So I think really the intent of that is to, when we're talking about obstructions, is a physical obstruction to a door, a ventilation system, or a fire system. So I would suggest that we strike the word windows from that particular section.
Are we then allowing these temporary signs to be, and I assume you're talking about from the inside of a window?
Correct, from inside of a window.
Facing out.
Correct.
And so that we're allowing the signs to be there on a permanent basis, basically.
Well, we have allowed window signs in the past, but we don't really have any regulation. And I do go, if we go down to what I'm proposing to be 383, 186F, and that would read window signs. And then window signs shall not exceed 35%, and of course, the percentage is negotiable, and as is the rest of the package. 35% of the total window display area for each business viewable from a public street or from a parking area. Currently, we don't have anything that really addresses it properly, I'll put it that way.
Have we ever had any issues with this at all, in terms of business owners putting a full window display or anything like that?
Well, it hasn't been an issue because I haven't viewed it as a sign. Let me tell you how the regulations are put together now. They really make it the determination of the zoning enforcement officer as terms of what is visible and what isn't. Doesn't give me any parameters in terms of looking in a window from 10 feet away or from 50 feet away. There's so much discretion there that I've just said that if it's inside, it's in a window. I've got no guidance to make a determination of what is visible and what isn't. Is it visible from the post road? Is it visible from the parking area? The regulations, the way the regulations just address it, it says if it's visible.
Or it says obstruct, actually.
If it's visible or obstruct.
In your experience,
has it been an issue?
Well, no, I'm trying to move forward. what would you like to see it at for your purposes of enforcement?
I don't really have a preference.
As long as it's clear and you can, and it's clear to you
Right.
that you can enforce it. Okay.
The reason I put that
Usually, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Usually, it's been the one area of relief for a commercial entity. If he can't put a temporary banner out, if he can't put an A-frame sign
Put it
out, he
in.
puts something in his window.
And the reason I put that in there is because during the discussions we've had with several people on the, particularly on the Post Road, the question always has come up many, many times. What about signs in windows? What about signs in windows? And our regulations are very vague on it. As I said, under C, it says obstructions. And again, I'll read it. It says, no sign shall be located or maintained so as to be a hazard to traffic or pedestrians, to obstruct any door, window, ventilation system, or fire escape, or exit to, or cause any hazard to public safety. So we have obstruct a window there. But But that seems to be dealing more with a physical obstruction.
And also, it's from a safety perspective, it looks like.
and
Correct.
It can,
Right.
you can have a sign in the window. It just
Well, that's what I'm saying. Right now
cause
we
it.
have windows, but it seems to be in an area that's dealing with a physical obstruction or a safety issue, which typically a sign in a window is not a safety issue. But I don't think we want to get in a situation where people are filling up their entire windows with signage.
Right.
And that's why I propose that we strike the word windows from C. Because we don't care if it's, we're not talking about a physical obstruction of a solid window. It's a physical obstruction in itself. And that we add what I had as F in that same subsection, limiting the amount of signage in a window and talking about which windows. It says viewable from a public street or from a parking lot.
And without regard to whether it poses any hazard to the public health or
Correct,
safety.
just because we're separating two issues. I mean, I think C deals with the safety issue, and the proposed F would deal with more of an advertising issue or an aesthetic issue.
Do we want to note here that the signs have to be inside of the window area instead of, because that,
Yes,
you know what I mean?
I think so. So I'll make a notation of that.
I don't think what you're saying makes sense, but I'm not sure I would delete the word window in subsection C. Because conceivably, you could have a sign that's not violative of the section F that you propose, but still might cause a hazard to public health and safety. So I'm thinking leave C the way it is, and then add your subsection
But
F.
wouldn't we then?
Well, they could have a neon sign on a door, which could break.
I mean, I don't know what
on the interior of the door.
Well, they're allowed to have that type of signage anyway.
No, but
I mean, typically you wouldn't put a neon sign inside
no,
the
I know,
door,
but I'm just saying for hazards for the window if you took it out, just like Ozzy was saying.
You think we should leave it in?
You're making the assumption, Bo, that if it doesn't exceed 35% of the total window display, that the sign couldn't possibly pose a hazard to the public health or safety.
Well, I don't see how a sign in a window, regardless of size, would cause a threat to public, health, safety, or welfare.
Or it could just be something with a chain on the door that swings back and forth.
I don't follow.
No, I'm saying a sign.
Typically, a sign is attached to the window, not hanging. But even on a door, too. I mean, that would be an obstruction to a door. I mean, or a safety hazard. Or on a door, a swinging thing would be, or any other hazard to public health or safety. So if you have a swinging sign attached to a door, clearly that would be a threat to health. I mean, to safety.
But I think what Ozzy and Rick are saying is that if we leave it in, not that I don't think either of them object to at least I haven't heard any objections to 186F as proposed, but by taking the windows out of C,
Okay.
You're saying that if the zoning enforcement officer does find a sign that is violative of health or safety issues, and there's no window language, he may not
Okay.
be of the power to take it off the window.
Okay, and my question here would be, and I'll leave it up to the two attorneys here. Does the word obstruct the window? If we allow 35% of the window to be covered in a sign, we are allowing an obstruction of that window. It's
Is
a
your,
visual
is your
obstruction.
objection the fact that it's called obstructions and maybe it shouldn't be called obstructions? Because the rest of that paragraph talks about hazards in C, which I don't think anyone objects to.
No,
And it's, by definition, it's going to be an obstruction because you can't see through the,
correct.
through the sign.
That's my point. I don't want to
Yeah,
have to, I don't want to
okay.
have conflicting regulation. So I think maybe we have to tweak that language somewhat if we agree that we want to have something in the line of F, that we're going to allow signage in windows. Am I going overboard in worrying about having the wording in there to obstruct any window? Because we would have a visual obstruction with a sign. Do you see what I mean?
I mean, I don't really know what C is directed to as far as a windows. I mean, I could.
Well, that's why I wondered too.
Block off a door,
Right.
You know, as a, an emergency, way out of a building.
Right, and that's why the rest of it seems to be talking about physical obstructions or threats. You don't want to obstruct a door. You don't want to obstruct a ventilation system. You don't want to obstruct a fire escape or exit.
Well, except the window theoretically is a way out of the building if, the other ways out are blocked.
If you take the word obstruct out of there and just say that no sign shall be located or maintained as to be a hazard or traffic, to traffic or pedestrians,
Do you see the little catch-22 that I'm looking at, though?
the word obstruction is not really the accurate word. You want to have, if the word obstructions was taken out of there and you substituted the word hazards or the obstruction, it screws you up because of the issue with the
Is
seeing.
it a visual obstruction or is it a physical obstruction?
Right.
But, I don't know why you would, what's the importance of, tinkering with subsection C?
Just because I don't want it to be in conflict with the proposed F.
Well,
That's the only reason
I don't see how it is, though.
So we could say, except as, or subject to F herein, no sign, in other words, deal with it that way, so as we're contemplating the fact that there will be a sign in the window.
Okay.
I think it's two separate things. I mean, your
I think it is, but
your F is directed to C is directed to a different purpose than F.
I understand. I agree with what you're saying.
So I mean,
but
in other words, if Paul identified a sign, no matter how big it was,
as being a threat to
that obstructed, any door, window, ventilation system, and so on, he could take action to
because it is an
obstruction.
Okay, or a safety issue.
But if he also, on the other hand, if he saw a sign that exceeded 35% of the total window display, he also could take action to stop that.
Okay. So you see no trouble in having the two?
I don't see these as inconsistent, if that's what you're worried about. I mean, I'm not.
What Bo's saying is that the word obstruct, by definition, when you shove a sign in your window, you're obstructing it.
Well, no, that's not in the sense it's used there. They're talking about
I know
you're talking about access. Or
I agree with what you're
and,
saying, but believe me, in the discussions we've had with some of these people, it's gonna come up.
Yeah.
Just say subject to.
I don't see that. I don't really see the inconsistency there. I don't know.
You don't think? Okay, so you think?
I haven't studied it, but I mean, just.
I'm just going by some of the
read of it.
experiences I've had in the past month or so with meeting with different property owners and business owners.
Paul, did you ever see anybody use more than 35% of a window? I mean, I really never saw.
I don't think there've been many.
Right.
It might be, but I can't say that there haven't been.
Right.
I'm sure there have been one or two instances where a lot of the window beyond
I can think
35%
of
was
one
taken.
right off the top of my head that Sunoco station. They probably exceed the 35%.
But I got to tell you, since we're talking about this and we're tinkering with the regulations, and we are going to open this door, we should regulate it. So I think 35%, if that's the number, that's fine, but it's got to be a percentage, and I think you're on the right track there.
Okay.
But a sign is just whatever you can see through a window? Because most of the gas stations aren't attached to the window, they're hanging out the drop ceiling.
These are some in this particular gas station I just mentioned that are attached to the window.
Yeah, I know, but at a gas station, they're all attached to the drop ceiling, hanging by chains. They're not attached to the window.
This particular one has them attached to the window.
Okay,
I think it reads as I wrote it. It
Still a
doesn't have to be
window sign.
attached to the window.
Well, that's
It
what I'm
says-
asking.
Why does it
It says
matter how
viewable.
it's...
In the proposal, it says viewable. So whether they attach it right to the window,
What's the difference how
whether
you
they hang it down.
affix it? Whether you tape it to the window or hang it from...
Yeah, because the regulation
Still,
reads
it's
viewable.
still...
Yeah, but viewable, you can see other signs into a store too. I mean, if you go to a department store, you look in the window, you can see plenty of signs in there.
Well, if it's viewable for
That's what I'm
driveway, and I
saying,
think
right.
you actually, we
Well,
want
he's
to
talking
have
about a window display.
Right,
we want to have a
You
little
tried-
bit of
you're-
discretion, and we have to apply a little bit of intent of the regulation. And I don't think the intent of the regulation is to sit in the parking lot and peer in as deeply as you can and see if you can.
No, but this goes to
Consider
the
something-
architectural standards, though, right? Doesn't it? I mean, you're approving that you're looking at the facade of a building, and you're saying, it's partly certain kind of building material, and it's partly glass, and glass is okay. But now, if that glass is entirely
Exactly, that's what I'm.
covered with a
a
sign,
sign, right.
then it doesn't give you the same architectural
Correct.
effect.
Yeah,
But you also
and that's
don't.
why I think that's why you
exactly.
propose
That's
it,
exactly why I proposed that.
Yeah, but you don't want someone to have a picture window in the front and just take 35% straight across and put a.
Well,
logo.
first of all, let me say that the 35% is just a number that I threw out there for discussion. We could certainly.
But you know what I'm saying? Someone could do a different. Because right now you don't really see one
And most
sign.
people don't want that. Most people want to have their window, most people like to view into a store and not have it blocked off. We could certainly reduce that number of 35%. It's just, I put that in there just as an example. I looked at several other regulations. Some go up to 45, 50%. I think that's excessive. So that's why I threw in the 35% as really a starting point. We can tinker with that later on, as long as what I really wanted to get was kind of the basis here and the feeling that if we want to, first of all, regulate signs and windows, or we could not allow them, period. I think from a business point of view, I think they probably do need the ability to put some signage in windows. So I don't object to them.
I think you're on the right track on both counts here. I was thinking about this. Maybe we can throw a language on the new, instead of on the old language, Bo, the 383-186C, stick it on 383-186 proposed F and say subject to subsection C herein, and then just do your thing there. So as to if it becomes a hazard, people understand that it's still subject to C.
Okay.
But since we have F in there, it's clear that we're allowing window signs.
Okay. Subject to 383-186C herein.
But as Ozzy said, that's clearly for
Absolutely.
hazard and safety issues.
But like I said, I brought the issue up because, as Paul can attest to, we've had people, when we're attempting to demonstrate that their signs are not in compliance, taking out every single thing you could possibly imagine and trying to claim it's a sign and somebody's getting away with something. So
I would request that you also add to these conversations if you see that we're missing something that has been an issue in the past.
absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I'm trying to get together a proposal that we can to make a formal proposal. So we'll move on to 383-186E. And here we have prohibited signs. And the first one is no banners. We may or may not want to allow banners in the commercial district, but we do allow banners in town on a regular basis for a number of things. There's a banner right now in front of the fire department. We typically have banners over Orange Center Road. So we shouldn't have a regulation that bans them. If we're going to allow them, even if we have it highly restricted, we should take the banning of them to prohibited signs. A banner should not be there if we're going to allow them in other regions, in other zones, or in other circumstances.
All those banners were special exceptions. They came in and asked for them.
True, but
Right.
where a special exception should not be banned. You should not be able to get a special exception for something that is specifically banned. So what I'm saying is we should
Yeah, it's something that you can get
right
by
by special
Regulate
permit.
it, maybe a
Yeah.
cost, something,
But
but
if it's banned, it's,
I have a couple of proposals on that later on in the outline here, but what I'm saying is that if we're going to allow them, and which we do allow them for civic things now, and I would not want to change that, but we should not have them specifically banned and then allow them under other circumstances. Does the commission agree with that?
I do.
Okay. Okay. Under 383, 187, 2D. Should improve this definition, and this again comes out of questions that have been raised during the different enforcement activities that we have. Currently it reads, temporary commercial signs shall be removed within 7 days after the conclusion of the event or enterprise the sign is promoting. Again, temporary commercial signs, this is the key here, because these are typically the, ABC roofing, or, Joe's siding, whatever, which we allow them to be put up. But again, it's not specific enough, I don't believe so. So what I'm proposing is that we change that to temporary commercial signs for work or services being performed on site. And again, this arises from a conversation I had with an individual who said, well, then I could put up a commercial sign on my front lawn for X amount of days. And if you read the regulation, it seems to say that, seems to support that. It's not the intent of the regulation, but it certainly seems to support that argument. So I think that we should make that a little bit more specific as to what type of temporary commercial signs we're dealing with here.
And we're going to carve out,
No, I was just gonna add, I mean, you're focused in, Bo, on, something the roofing company.
Right, this is in the
would put
residential area. These are signs in the residential area. This is under, this whole portion here of 187 is regulations for the residence district.
Well, what about then a real estate, open house?
it's going to be a separate section for that, I assume.
Yes.
Or for sale, or,
Yeah.
The sign probably should go with the permit. If you put a roof on, you're gonna need a building permit.
that's in a separate place, Bo, is that what you're saying?
Pardon me?
The sign that you would have for a real estate open house, or a for sale sign,
Well,
real estate for sale,
Paul
is
and I
that in a
talked.
different place?
Paul and
or-
I talked about that a little bit this morning, just very briefly. And residential real estate signs to date really have not been a problem. So, I mean, if the commission thinks we should address them at this time, we certainly should do it. If not,
We had some recent issues where some realtors were putting a for sale sign at the end of a street with an arrow directing them to the house for sale. A few months ago, I got letters out to all the major realtors in town and said, this is a practice which should stop.
But
But
is there anything in the regulations now? Do we have any regulations regarding?
we do not.
We do not have
No.
any regulations in there now at all.
So you think we should include residential real estate signs in the regulations while we're doing this review?
Well, if we don't, then they're going to be handled under temporary commercial signs, as we just discussed.
Yeah.
So that upon the sale of the home, that
Right.
those things have to be down within X amount of days.
Right. Because that's covered here, within 7 days after the conclusion of the event or enterprise the signs promoting.
So that you're not proposing, but so far we're talking about handling them in the residential zone in the same manner as all temporary signs.
Correct.
It will be possibly in the commercial zone where we're going to delineate them differently.
Correct. And I do have a separate regulation for the commercial zone later on in the text. But if you think we should go ahead and specifically regulate them while we're doing the review, there's no problem with that either.
I mean, size has never been an issue that I'm aware of on the residential, in the residential district.
It
I don't know.
hasn't been. Again, do we want
The way
to?
this is 2D, right, 2D, temporary commercial signs, that would refer to the real estate for sale sign.
I would say yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
So, if you put in this language that you propose here, for work or services being performed on site, you don't mean to exclude, or do you, the real estate sign?
I don't mean to exclude them. No.
You don't, okay.
And the way I read that, if I was to try to interpret it, it was that listen, that sign is able to be there for the length of time that the listing contract goes on until there's a buyer, or until it's removed. Right, until such time as that sign is removed, the property is
Right.
removed from the market, or it's sold.
Right. And it
Yeah, you
has to
could
be.
have an open house, like you say, you don't want the sign down the street.
Well, it does say on site also. So in other words, your sign has to be on site.
I don't mind that down,
I mean,
down the
it's-
street having an open house
Yeah.
sign.
But usually
that has
they
not
take
been an
them
issue.
down.
Usually it's a one-day thing.
Yeah,
And they
It's up
usually
on a
take them
Sunday.
down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I don't think, I think we have to, somehow, we're not going to be able to cover every single possible situation unless we want to go crazy with these sign regulations. So I think we have to have a little bit of faith in some common sense approach as well.
Well, the thing is, if somebody's gonna put a for sale sign somewhere down the street from their house, it's gonna be putting it on somebody else's property.
Exactly.
Okay, and here we go, because I'm the bonehead who did this, where, I was approached by a local realtor who said, listen, there's a house, I live in a cul-de-sac, Lisa's house that I pay for. Anyhow, so, and they came to me and said, can we put a little, arrow deal on the side? You know how many people asked us, oh, you're selling, terrific. So, I don't think it raises the level of being a problem, especially if,
I don't either.
yeah.
I honestly don't. I don't think that's... So, we're satisfied with that? We can go forward? Okay.
I think you can treat it the same way in the residential zone.
Okay. Then I have a little statement here, and I'll read it. It says, we have by practice allowed special community events, signs most notably in front of High Plains Community Center. However, we do not specifically provide for them in our regulations. You could kind of take some of the language out of 383-187 and use it to justify it, but then I go on to say that if it is the desire of the Commission to allow community event temporary signs, we should address them specifically in our regulations. We should include language in our regulations that permit temporary signs for community events, including town-sponsored programs, charitable functions, functions at places of worship, schools, etc. So what I'm proposing is that we add 383-187-2E, and that to read temporary signs or banners promoting community events, including but not limited to functions or events sponsored by the Town of Orange, places of worship, nonprofit and civic organizations. So again, that just clarifies something that we've been doing for years.
But they still have to come in for the approval, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Where does it say that?
No, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, where does it
Well-
doesn't say anything about that now, though.
I believe prior to this, there's a
I
notation.
just don't want them to read this and say we could just put it up.
I don't see where,
I thought we had a requirement for permits. Permit required under D. Unless otherwise provided in this article, no sign shall be established, constructed, reconstructed, enlarged, or extended, or moved, or structurally altered until an application for certificate of zoning compliance therefore has been approved by the zoning enforcement officer. All signs shall conform to the provisions hereafter specified. An application for a certificate of zoning compliance for any sign shall include the following, and it goes on with a list of requirements. So I would, that's under 383-184D.
They fill out an application for banners? Yes. They do?
for A-frame signs in front of the community center.
No, I'm talking about
the big ones for like the
big ones
Rotary.
across the, right. No, I didn't think so.
But they're supposed to, though.
Oh, I know, but
Well, this is one of our problems. We have things that are allowed by practice, but
It's not codified.
correct.
Then if you put this in, then everyone that's gonna put a banner is gonna go fill an application out.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's gonna be
Which I think they should anyway. I mean, if you read the regulation, I think that an application should be filled out. If Paul thinks that might be problematic,
No, I don't think it'll be problematic, but if you do go in that direction, you might want to waive the fee on something like that.
Why not? We could waive the fee when they come in.
right,
Right.
right.
I mean, that or just in this section, you just put, has to go. Because, it's
Somewhere in here, you think we should refer to requirement that a permit is required, even though it's
it's really gonna be a town function, right? That,
town, place of worship, a church or
well, that's what I'm
synagogue.
saying. It's not gonna be a private developer.
No.
Right.
And that's why I limited to these, to
Right.
nonprofit civic organizations,
Mm-hmm.
churches, or places of worship, and the town.
Because if they fill out the application, then you gotta waive the fee also.
Yeah.
So, just less paperwork if somehow it's written in here. Wouldn't you think it'd be simpler? The way we always did it?
I'm still stuck on the thing is, should a private developer, why, we have several larger projects that are going in town now. Why wouldn't there be a banner allowed for them?
Well,
I,
that's an area I'm addressing later on in the proposal as well. But
I think no matter how much and how definitive you get with these regulations, at one point you have to say for the good of the community, we need community signs, and there are instances where
Right.
we're going to approve banners.
So does anybody object or think we should modify that? That statement under E?
No,
Again, I'm just trying to
temporary
have a
signs.
regulation that addresses what we've allowed in practice in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually takes care of my concern, which was temporary signs, banners promoting community events, including but not limited to functions or events sponsored by the town of Orange, worship, nonprofit, or civic organizations. That really limits any kind of private developing that I was worried
Yes.
about.
Let me ask you something. Why wouldn't you try to get this concept in under 383, 186E? Because there you say prohibited signs. You say no banner, pennant, captive balloon, and so on and so forth. Then you could say except that, banners promoting community events, including but not limited to, the language you have
Yeah.
there. I think that may be a better place for it.
So you think instead of having it under 187 2E, that we put it under,
Yeah.
make it 383 186F?
No.
Or just include it in
Just
E?
I would add another phrase after what you have there in E,
Okay.
where you have prohibited signs, but you're going to make an exception for those signs or banners or whatever that promote a community event of some kind.
But one we're talking about all districts, and the other one we're talking about regulations for the residential district.
Well,
What do you? I
we
mean,
do actually have sometimes civic banners along the post road in front of the fire department. I can think of they do it sometimes, so perhaps that is a better place for it then.
because that's really what you're trying to get at here. Is you're concerned that in E you're prohibiting certain things, but you want to make an exception
Right, for,
when the sign is being used for the purposes you described there.
that's my intent, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll make note that we move that. Okay, also going back to the residential district, and if we move the above, the 383 187 2E to 383 186, we would change the designation for the other proposal I have. And it says we should consider adding specific language, and I have two different choices there of where it could go, but to specifically address small signs noting burglar, fire alarms, dog fences, etc. that you see on mailboxes. Because believe it or not, this was another item that was thrown up at us that, yes, yeah, that this is a commercial advertisement. I mean, it's first of all, I think that they do serve a purpose. A community safety purpose to advertise, look, my house is protected by a burglar alarm. I have a dog that's protected by an electric fence, so joggers don't panic when the dog comes out to the edge of the road. It really does serve, and quite honestly, even if we were to prohibit them, it's never going to get enforced. So I think in order to avoid the argument that we should specifically address it within our regulations at this type of sign, and we limit it to, to 1 square foot, or whatever size we choose. I mean, that seemed to be just it's a random number I picked up.
I think 1 square foot though.
Yeah, but I think that's, believe it or not, as I said, it's been brought up on a couple of occasions.
Oh, where is this?
That would be in the residential district. So we could make it,
Does it? Would that apply just in a residential? I mean, you're.
yes. This is for the residential district. I think this is
We
really
have
the
no
only place.
objection if you had that same kind of sign in the commercial district.
Well, typically, well, first of all, I think most people with a commercial district have it in a window, perhaps, or something of that nature. They don't have it out by the roadside. In the residential district, they usually have it on the mailbox or on a
mailbox is where you're
fence or
gonna find
something
it.
like that. So I don't think it would really apply in the commercial district. And again, quite frankly, I don't think we'd want them. I don't think we'd want to have little 1-foot signs in the commercial district saying we're protected by ABC, alarm company or whatever the case may be. But in the residential district, I do think they serve a purpose, and again, it would never be enforceable even if we were to ban them. So I think that we should codify them within the regulations. And I
I think that makes a lot of sense.
so I'll just correct the number there. number. Okay. We'll move on. In the existing regulations, I think we should remove the first sentence under 383-188A1 because it says signs permitted in the residential district. I don't think we want to allow all the signs that are permitted in the residential district to be allowed in the commercial district. So I think we should just strike that line. Again, it appears to allow temporary signs and it doesn't have any restrictions on them, so I think we should just get rid of it.
Hey, Bo, on the, are there some residential homes in the commercial district? And are they going to be suffering or impacted by taking that language out? Let me just think for a second.
I can't think of any, but that's a good question.
There are homes, certainly. I mean, all the people from Stu Leonard's are in commercial districts, I assume, commercial areas.
And there might be a couple, there might be
On
a couple
Indian
at the end
River?
of Dogwood too, or Dogburn.
Handful. I don't know if it'll be an issue, though.
I don't think it would be either, actually. Okay.
Why, if, for example, work were, if a painter wanted to put his contractor's sign in front of a commercial building.
If that's the case, we should maybe have,
I mean, that's what they're, when you think about what signs are permitted in a residential, you're talking about a real estate sign, you're talking about a contractor's sign.
but believe me, these are being also used to try to justify improper signs that we allow in the,
Well, except that a contractor's sign is theoretically temporary. I mean, it's while the person's doing the work, or a real estate sign, I mean, the real estate for sale sign, you have no objection to that being in a commercial.
no, but I think that we should address any signs we want in the commercial district completely separately from in the residential district. We have too much crossover there. If we just say everything that's allowed in the residential district.
Well, 3 says temporary signs as permitted in the residence district.
Except I have comments on that as well.
But in there, you could.
Your sign. The one that you just mentioned would be okay.
That would include the contractor's
Right.
sign. It would include the real estate sign.
Well, the real estate, I think, is going to be handled separately, so.
Well,
but-
actually, the in 3 also, it specifically prohibits sandwich board signs too, which is something we'll get on later. But I just think that it's a better idea if we want to have signs that we allow in the residential district to be included in the commercial district, we should include them in these other districts and not refer back to other regulations, because I think it's going to avoid confusion.
All right.
Okay. Under 383-188-2, I believe there's a typo in our regulations, because it reads, private warning and traffic signs with no advertising thereon and not exceeding 4 square feet in area located and intended for warning acid traffic control. I believe that's should be and traffic control. Okay, so we just, when we're changing it, we should change that. And here we get on to what Ozzy just mentioned, under 383-188A3, where it reads temporary signs as permitted in the residence district, except sandwich board signs which are expressly prohibited. And this goes back to what I was saying, if we decide we're going to allow temporary signs in the commercial district, for instance, sale, whatever, again, here in the residential district, we limited them to 90 days. If we were to allow that type of signage in the commercial district, I think 90 days is far too excessive. And again, that's why I think we should just scratch that portion of it. And then we should have separate size limitations. There's size limitations up here. Temporary signs to not exceed 6 square feet in area or a maximum of 32 square feet on any building. And that's why I think it's just better to get away from a cross-reference to the residential district. There's a little notation there. Sandwich board signs expressly prohibited only in zones except the residential zone. I don't really know.
Wait a minute. I'm just. What about a for sale? For sale sign in a residential in a commercial district?
The commercial real estate signs?
Commercial real estate.
I have a whole
Oh,
section on
all
that
right,
coming up.
No, because I mean, 90
Yes.
days is not going to necessarily be
yeah.
enough to sell the property.
Right.
So-
I've got a whole
Okay.
section on that coming up.
All right.
And Paul, as far as the place, are we up to the placement yet, or of these things, or no? We're just talking about the size so far.
On the placement of temporary signs in the
Yes.
commercial district, coming up. Okay. And again, keep in mind, I mean, these are just some of the, the thoughts that I put together, and I'm really looking for input from the commission as to their feeling and suggestion.
These certainly address many of the issues that were raised, both publicly and privately, at least with the people that I dealt with.
Yeah. For real estate signs, I propose that we add a 383, 188E to put it there. Real estate signs in commercial zones, that we limit it to one sign allowed per lot. That commercial real estate signs advertising sale, lease, or rental of space within a commercial or industrial building shall be no greater than 16 square feet per side or 32 square feet in the aggregate. Now, we may want to change that, but that's typically what the real estate signs are now, a 4x4 sign. Without, some of them now have that certain agent down below and everything, and I think we should scratch that, the sign thing. And we may want to,
You mean they have, just to clarify, so
it might
they
have the 4x4.
and then
which
they
is
have
the
an agent sign hanging off of
Yes,
it, you
yeah.
mean? I understand.
But again, we may decide too that that's a little bit too large to have. This is the typical sign that we have. This was given to me, the information was given to me by a representative of Colonial Properties, that this is kind of the standard real estate sign.
Mike knows what he's doing, number one. Number two, you have a lot of pretty big setbacks on many of the properties, so especially with the aging population, as I speak to you. I think I think if that's the normal size of the signs, I'd hate to try to restrict that further, let them do their business.
Well, that's why I kind of took his instruction there. Then I go on to 3, commercial real estate signs advertising the sale, lease, or rental of space within commercial or industrial buildings cannot be put in place prior to 60 days before the expiration of the existing lease or rental agreement, and must be removed within 5 working days after a lease, rental, or sale of the property. Number 4, the sign may not be located whereby its position, shape, color may interfere with or obstruct the view or to be confused with any authorized traffic sign, signal, or device. The location of the sign is subject to approval of the zoning enforcement officer, building inspector, police department, or fire department. A registration form, and this is I think with real estate, we want to be a little bit more fluid. So instead of having a formal application, having them come in and have to pay an application fee and all that, or have it waived, I think what we should do is have Paul or the commission come up with a form that they can either mail in or, it'd probably be preferable to have them bring it in. But if not, something to make it a little bit easier to do. And that's why I said a registration form must be filed with the zoning enforcement officer with the following information: an accurate description of the proposed sign, confirming that it conforms to the restrictions of 383, 188E2, identification of the space that is being advertised, the date of expiration of the existing lease or rental agreement, and the proposed location of the sign on the lot.
Bo, I note that you allowed them to put, and I understand this is just proposal, but cannot be put in place prior to 60 days before the expiration of the existing lease or rental agreement. So that, is your intent not to have 2 at the same time?
Well, my intent is that if we don't want to make them have a vacancy before they can advertise for the vacancy. So if they know that a certain tenant is not going to re-up their lease, I think we should allow them to advertise that space prior to the premises being vacated.
You're saying that they can't do it greater than 60 days prior
Correct.
to the end of the
Correct.
lease? Okay.
So in other words, when they fill out this registration form, they have to say, unit XYZ is the lease is up as of January 31st. The tenant does not want to re-sign, so therefore I want to put up the sign now. And again, the time limit is just proposed. We may want to lengthen it. We may want to shorten it. That's the kind of information that we'll get out of the public
The
hearing.
signage inside the building will still go by the 35%. If the building,
This is just with the real estate sign. So yes, I would say yes if they want to throw a sign in
the
there.
building's vacant, usually
yes.
they take the whole window up
Yeah.
lease.
I would say too, 35% with that.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, really, and I know Paul met with David Metzger and Barbara Metzger from Sinorama, and I did, and I know Judy was going to, and she was sick, and I don't know if she ever did. And you would think that because he is in the sign business, that it would be a pretty one-sided argument. But I found his information to be very, very informative and not biased. I mean, he just brought out some factual material for us to look at and to consider, and really, really wasn't trying to push his own agenda. Was really just trying to inform myself, and I'm assuming Paul as well. And I found it beneficial.
The only question I had is we have some other instances of real estate banners being placed on the building.
I don't think that we should allow that.
I think maybe you should specifically prohibit them, or real estate signs in that form.
Well, the banner would have to come in for a permit. It's the same situation.
Again,
The banner.
When they come in, we'll say yes or no.
Well, no, so far we're only allowing banners for the civic
Right.
functions. So I think that covers that.
I don't want to leave this yet before raising this issue. It says, I think the intent for, let's see, 383, 188E3 is good. It says, cannot be put in place prior to 60 days before the expiration of the existing lease or rental agreement. The problem that I foresee is that there are sometimes month-to-month for periods of time with no written lease.
Okay.
Expiration of the existing lease. Well, you could say that. You didn't say the word written.
So if they had a month-to-month agreement, they are obviously
It's still a lease.
But they'd still be looking for a long-term. I would assume a long-term tenant.
I'm just concerned that someone's going to try to weasel more than the time frame because they could always leave. There's no written agreement that they're going to leave at a particular time certain.
No, I think that.
They're not going to put a sign up there for a lease if the guy's not leaving.
But see, a lot of times we have cases where certain real estate agents put their signs out with no vacancies. It's really just it's saying, hey, look, come to ABC Realty. We're advertising in front of this space, but by the way, I've got some other spaces here. But
this will cover the vast majority of it. We'll have to deal with it on an individual basis.
I think that if I don't see another way of getting around that. I thought
you won't, and you'll never know either because you don't know who's going to be month to month, and you don't know who's going to maybe re-sign, and
I think we've covered it to the best of our ability if we require them to submit that information that this to the best of our ability, and that's the key. Is we also have to be reasonable about how we do it as well.
If it becomes an issue, we'll deal with it at that time.
Okay. Then we move on to its temporary signs, and just again, during the meetings that we held at the town hall with concerned members of the community, several merchants expressed a desire to have the ability to put out temporary signs for special events, sales, etc. And if we decide to do this, I think we have to require a permit. We have to limit the total time the signs can be in place. We have to limit the number of days the sign can be in place. Establish a time limit for removal. Limit the number of times annually that a temporary signs are permitted. Establish a size limit. Establish design and construction standards. Consider whether or not to allow sandwich board signs or other portable signs.
The placement too.
Yeah, and here's the thing where I'm really. I have in here a proposal to allow them, but I'm not convinced that it's the right way to go yet. I think that a lot of that will be determined at the public hearing, but just to put it out there for debate, I propose this language, and I think we'll all make up our minds when we continue the public hearing. So this is what I'm proposing: temporary signs, and I designated 383 188F. Temporary signs, provided that a permit shall be required for all temporary signs. Number 2, temporary signs advertising a commercial sales event or promotion may be posted for a period of 10 days. Now, this is an area where we may have further discussion, but it's just a thought. No commercial establishment shall be granted more than one temporary sign permit per allowed time.
Your intent with per allowed time? You mean put in every 120 days or every?
Well, the allowed time is that we're allowing, the proposal would allow them to have them for 10 days and then up to 3 times a year is in the proposal. So in other words, you couldn't take 2 of them at the same time and put it out there and really kind of cover the area. You would have, you get your one permit if you want to take advantage of that, but you can't combine all your 3 allowed permits per year at one time. No commercial establishment shall be granted more than 3 temporary sign permits in a single calendar year. No temporary sign shall exceed 8 square feet. Now, we may want to drop that down to, say, 6 square feet per side or 16 square feet in aggregate, so we may want to make it 6 and 12. You know, in talking with Dave, the sandwich board signs that he had, they were 2 by 3, so you have 6 square feet. Again, that's something we can decide at the public hearing if we decide to go forward with that. And this would also, the wording here would also allow several smaller signs, I'll put it that way, to keep that in mind, where the proposal at least limits the sign to 6, 8, whatever square footage. But another option would be, say, instead of a sandwich board sign, those little push-in signs.
I'm not sure I know what you mean.
Well, you know, like almost the size of the campaign signs during election time. Those, I believe, are 18 by 24. So, and again, that's why I put the
You
side.
mean the ones that we see 4,000 of on each?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
So if we do that to, you know, that's why I want to limit the size and then the aggregate as well. So you couldn't have a temporary sign being too large, or if you wanted to go small signs, you couldn't have too many of the small signs as well. And again, this is I'm really open to some suggestion here.
You're saying that if they kept within the allowed square footage, they could have 4 signs as long as in the aggregate they added up to no more than the limitation?
Correct. And I went that route because I was examining several different regulations in different communities, and that's kind of the route that they all took. That they had a size limit, so that you were limited to, obviously, to the certain size. You couldn't exceed a certain size, and then, but if you wanted to break it down into smaller, then they went with the aggregate. Temporary signs shall be designed to be stable under all weather conditions, including high winds. No temporary sign shall obstruct, impair, or impair a public sidewalk, public or private street or driveway, a traffic control sign, fire hydrant, or otherwise create a hazard to public safety. Temporary signs must be of a structural and aesthetic quality that does not have a negative effect on the health, safety, and welfare of other commercial enterprises or the residents of the town of Orange. Temporary signs may not be placed within 12 feet of any public roadway. Temporary signs determined to be in violations of 383, 188F, 6, 7, 8, or 9 by town officials are subject to removal by the town without notice. So that's... Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I just want to clarify this temporary signs. Are these like the signs that you might go down Post Road and see, like going out of business sale?
Going out of business sale,
But-
Easter sale.
Right. So if you say 12 feet, they can't be anywhere near the sidewalks. They put them between the sidewalk and...
Well, you also could put it, you know, by nature, but you could have somebody wanting a temporary sign within the business itself.
You know, I'm talking about all those signs they always put up, like on a weekend. That
Right.
Got
Like the-
300 of them all the way down, all the way
Like
down.
the political signs, the push
Well,
signs.
whatever, yeah, but I'm saying usually it's a going out of
But
business.
what
or-
that directs you is also, Rick, you could have somebody choosing to put their temporary sign instead of having it on the roadside. They could put it within the shopping center, for instance, and blocking the sidewalk of the shopping center, and that's why I put that language in there.
You had me on number 8 until you said the word aesthetic. I think we have to be either more specific or less specific.
Okay?
I'm not sure which. A structural of structural integrity, I understand that it does not have a negative impact or negative effect on the health, safety, and welfare of the other commercial enterprises or the residents of the town of Orange. What were you thinking when you put down the aesthetic?
Well, because I don't think we'd want to have a temporary sign that somebody went out there with a sloppy paintbrush and, you know, on a piece of plywood and, you know, going out of business sale or Easter sale. So I deliberately left that very gray so that we had a large amount of discretion in that zone.
I'm not sure we want any discretion in that.
Okay.
And I'm throwing it out there. It's just that we're starting to get down a slope that, as they call in the law, the slippery slope, that I'm not sure we want to even start to regulate what we think is not aesthetically pleasing.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
I'm open to suggestion then.
No, not that smart.
I think we should address in some manner, and I don't, and you know, that we have to have a, you know, a nice quality sign.
As long as it's not offensive. Okay. And that's another word that, you know, drives people who do that kind of work crazy, First Amendment work. I'm not sure how you're going to figure out what's aesthetically pleasing to you. And
It's going to be figured out by Paul. Problem solved.
The only comment I had is that the last major change we had with our sign regulations was, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, and it had to do with a lawsuit with regard to granite billboard. Our sign regulations are different than any other regulations within the zoning regs. Basically, if one section of it is deemed to be unconstitutional, the entire section on signs is deemed to be unconstitutional.
So maybe we strike aesthetic?
Well, no. But what I'm saying is, ultimately, Vinnie's going to have some
yes,
input
yeah.
on this and review.
You know what?
Review.
Okay. I'll put a question mark on that so Vinnie can review that part.
my point is that I think that the structural with the health and safety, I think there's no question about that. But when you start talking about aesthetic, then you have to start talking about, okay, aesthetically pleasing or okay to whom?
Yeah, well, plus it's even hard to understand how the aesthetic quality of a sign could impact health, safety, and welfare.
Well, it could affect health, safety, and welfare. I mean, obviously, welfare by having something that's just so sloppy that it deters other people from entering a certain shopping center or
And my question is, there may be signs that are intentionally sloppy because to get somebody's attention.
Okay.
And while it may not be pleasing to you, it may be very eye-catching and pleasing to the proprietor. So, in any event, that's my question on that.
We'll put a big question mark on that part. And we'll, so that's what I have so far in the commercial district. Then we
And this
have,
is totally, I mean, this is a response to the relative public outcry asking for enforcement of and allowance of, in certain times, temporary signs.
correct.
And this will give Paul a club to enforce the regulations of the temporary signs when he sees the violations in a more, I don't know, even-handed manner than we've been doing before this.
Well, I think the even-handedness is
I would kind of differ with that assessment. I don't think it's an outcry first. I think it's from some vocal smaller retailers.
We had a lot of people. I mean, Orange is a relatively small town, and we had a bunch of retailers attend our. I mean, it was free food, so that's. But aside from that, it was something that we had 50 or 60 people there, many of whom were retailers on the Post Road.
again.
I think what really kind of turned the tide here is that the enforcement scales were really tipped in favor of the town. We've had different enforcement tactics based upon pretty much what the current town attorney felt. A lot of the tactics that we're using now, we were able to use years ago. And when a new administration came in, and there was a new town attorney, and we went over the enforcement process, there was a difference of opinion. We then reverted back to some of the old techniques that we used to use, such as confiscating the signs, personal inspections to give warnings, and I think that's kind of where we are now, because in the past we weren't able to enforce the regulations quite as good.
Do you think, in your experience, that we even need to address the temporary sign? I mean, right now we don't allow any of them, right?
My feeling with regard to the temporary sign is it's a legislative function, and you determine what you want it to be.
And that, that's I still have mixed feelings.
I guess if you're asking me if I think it should be changed, again, that's really with regard to the commission.
On number 10 for temporary signs, could we put in to get your sign back, there's going to be a fee?
Is that
I mean,
I think we can handle that administratively. Normally what we do is the first time we confiscate it, it's available for 30 days. The second time it's discarded.
okay.
Can't get it back.
Well, I mean, that's fine too. Yeah.
we'll continue on to 383-190, which currently reads site plans and special exceptions. And here I'm proposing to have some other language. The first one, if we relocated the temporary signs or banners, as Ozzy suggested before, we would not need this notation, which is temporary signs or banners as permitted under 383-187-2E, and that was to allow that type of banner that we allow in the residential district to also be by special permit allowed in the commercial districts. But again, if we moved it as Ozzy suggested, that would not be necessary. Then they go on to say temporary signs or banners used to identify or promote a business while an application for a permanent conforming sign has been filed and the application is pending. Number 3, temporary signs or banners used to identify or promote a business while an approved permanent sign is under construction, not to exceed 30 days without the approval of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And again, I have signs and banners down here, but we may decide that we don't want to allow banners, for instance. This is
For a grand opening, isn't that usually a banner?
we have that further down.
Okay.
If I remembered, it was something I was considering putting in. Okay. Sorry. Temporary signs or banners approved by the commission advertising the grand opening of a commercial enterprise shall be posted no more than 30 days. So again, we're allowing a future business to kind of promote themselves prior to being in existence. Coming soon, opening, whatever. And these are special permits so that we deliberately didn't set a size limit on them. They would have to come before us, and we could evaluate each one depending on the location that it's going to be put in, depending on the shopping center, and so on. So we could look at each one. If we decide to go down this road, we could take each one on an individual basis, but still have a way to allow them. Please.
I was finish that thought, because I was just going to...
Still have a way to allow them within our regulations. As I alluded to before, we have one person in particular that had a couple banners that were originally removed by Paul. He had them down for a certain amount of time, and then he came back and they put them back up. And this particular person clearly has a need for this additional signage. The pylon sign that's in front of his business now. There's another building that is vacant, and there was some talk that it was, at one point it was for, the lease was supposed to go through, and the part of the lease was that they were going to put a new pylon sign out. So clearly this person didn't want to invest in a new sign of his own, only to have it be thrown out and have to go with another one 6 months down the road. By the same token, he didn't know if that was going to happen in the near future, so he did not want to redo his sign. So he's kind of in limbo here. So we gave him couple different options to which he can come in compliance with, and he's investigating them. But in the meantime, we allowed him to keep up his banners because he is trying to comply. But that's a little bit gray in our regulations. So I think this codifies a situation just like that in some of these proposals. Ozzy, you had?
Well, I was going back to the last thing on temporary signs. I was just going to suggest an idea on drafting. I was looking at 383-188A.
Okay.
3, where we mentioned temporary signs. And I thought maybe a better way to do this would be to say something like temporary signs as permitted in the residence district, and then I would say provided that, and then I would basically list the things that you've identified as limiting or describing or defining temporary signs that you have here,
Okay, now wait, we're going back to
383,
Yeah.
188A3.
Okay.
Where so he's saying what we have is temporary signs as permitted in the residence district, and then I would, right after that, I'd say,
Well, we talked about striking that.
well, what I was going to say is temporary signs as permitted in the residence district, provided that, and then I would just add, then you make a list under that. 1, a permit shall be required for all temporary signs. 2, temporary sign, just the language you have proposed that you would put in F. I think a better place for it is right there. I think the sandwich board signs don't even need to be mentioned specifically because they're not going to meet the criteria that you identified here. They're not going, for example, they're not going to be stable under all weather conditions, including high winds. Because you're saying temporary signs are permitted, but they're going to be permitted under these following conditions that you've identified in the 188F that you propose.
Okay.
So,
So you're
I'm
saying
just
that-
saying that I think is the right place for that.
So you're saying that this should be moved.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you should create a new section F. I think the concepts
Okay.
that you lay out there should be incorporated into A3, because they describe, what temporary, the conditions under which you're going to allow temporary signs. See what I mean?
Incorporate into
Paul, we have, until this point, not allowed any of these temporary signs at all?
You mean special sales signs in the commercial district? That's other than the commission did institute a policy for outdoor displays, tent sales. That's the only other time I'm aware of that we permitted it.
How about, no, but there had been no banners or anything like that that have been legal?
Oh.
Well, there is one exception, and Walter alluded to that individual. Oddly enough, he complained about a sign that I had approved, a couple signs, where a shopping center was under construction, and I approved a temporary sign that said, "Our stores are still open," because there was no signage on the building. So in those instances, I have approved that. Another example where I've approved a temporary sign, although it's not up yet, is Chips. They're going to be taking down their pylon sign and putting a new pylon sign up. And I told them they could have a temporary sign identifying the site as Chips. There's no signage on the building. The building's being redone open. The pylon sign's coming down. So I said, give me a drawing and I'll grant a permission for a temporary sign. So in those instances, I have approved a temporary sign.
But although, again, we're going back to where we allow them, and I think we should, we have to have some leeway for certain circumstances, as Paul just mentioned. But in our regulations, they're not allowed. So
Well, I think they are, but I think you're trying to clarify it.
Well, they're allowed as permitted in the residence district.
But temporarily, currently, we don't allow banners, period.
Right, but you want to change that, though.
We want to change that, yes, but I'm talking about current, what we have currently.
Yeah.
Okay, so you suggested we
I'm
move...
I'm agreeing with everything you have here.
Yeah,
I'm
just-
just
Well, that's
suggesting a different place.
Yeah, and I think that's a
to
good
locate.
suggestion.
But
And
you might.
we may or may
but
not...
It may make sense, though, to, Paul raises a very specific, valid circumstance under which you would want to allow
a
a
banner.
temporary.
Yeah, and that's why I have those for the, under the special exceptions. So we have those, the ability in that section.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is there a way to do these temporary signs that it has to be a permanent business? Meaning, those businesses come in for Easter or Halloween, they come in for a month.
Well, that's why that's why I put in here for a permanent conforming sign. So I tried to cover that base as well as I could. So in other words, we'd allow the banner if you have applied for a permanent sign application. And then
But
while a permanent sign is under construction.
So somebody that's renting a place for 1 month is okay to do all these signs?
Well, not really.
That's why I'm trying to, because it's not fair for these people to stay here all year long.
Well, that's why I'm saying, that's why I deliberately put in the wording, for instance, under number 2. Temporary signs or banners used to identify or promote a business while an application for a permanent conforming sign. These people do not typically come in with a sign application, and therefore, if they don't come in with that, no banner.
So if somebody comes in just for a particular season, they can't get a sign.
Right.
In other words, they come in for the 3 months prior to Christmas.
Right, because we had a lot of
Or
complaints
Halloween.
about this
Right,
type
that's,
of...
a lot of people complaining about that. They're here all year long.
And that's why I put in those wording
Right.
under the 2 areas where you would allow these temporary signs with a special exception, temporary banners. That's why I put wording in there that referred to a permanent sign under construction or a permanent conforming sign that an application has been filed. So at least it makes it somewhat more difficult. It's not to say somebody might come in and apply for a permanent sign with no intention of ever putting one up, but
But what about the owner of a property who's been trying for many, many months to lease the property and he can't? And somebody has the opportunity to lease it temporarily to somebody for 3 months, you know.
But that's what they usually do, just 2 months and that's it.
Well, I know, but I mean, it's going to make it all the more difficult for this guy to get 3 months of rent.
No,
around Christmas time if he, you know, if the tenant can't put up a sign.
There are signs that would be allowed under these proposed regulations.
well,
Not really.
they could put up a temporary sign for the period of 10 days or whatever. They could do that. And I suppose you could do them consecutively. If they don't cross over, so that would allow them 30 days of signage. But that was a big problem, I'll say, that a lot of people have, that when we allow these, I'll use it with the Halloween costumes because that's the most obvious example.
Right.
We have a couple businesses in town that are year-round businesses, that these people get whacked by these fly-by-night businesses that come in for Halloween costumes, for instance.
And they have these signs every 10 feet down the post road.
And that's why I specifically, with the banners that they put up, those would not be allowed because they do not. So I'm trying to add in some protection for our permanent businesses.
They'd be able to put up signs in their windows. I mean, like any other retailer.
They would.
All right, and they'd be able to put in the temporary sign that we talked about for the 10 days. And I think there was one other type. If they wanted to do a permanent sign, if they were in a shopping center, why couldn't they add a sign? So,
Yes,
I mean, I don't feel bad for the people who come in temporarily. We shouldn't discriminate against them. But I don't think we should give them a leg up either.
No, I don't either. And that's why I put in the reference to permanent conforming signs. Like you said, they do have a couple options. We're certainly not going to eliminate them, but I think we give a little bit of a level of protection to our existing year-round businesses in town, and I think that's the intent of, we want to support them as much as we can. Another type of sign that we typically allow, but it's not addressed in our regulations, is development and construction signs, like they had at Springbrook Commons, given the date of grand opening, a little picture of it and everything. So we allow them. I think we should allow them, but I think, again, we have to regulate them and provide for them within the regulations. So I propose that we added a 383-190B. This, again, is under the special permit regulations, or portion of this. And I have construction signs erected in connection with an approved development. One temporary construction sign per street front, not to exceed 32 square feet in area. Temporary construction signs may not be erected closer than 12 feet from any public roadway or right-of-way. Temporary construction signs may be of structural, and here we go with aesthetic, so we'll take that out of there again. Of structural quality that does not have a negative effect on health, safety, and welfare of other commercial enterprises or residents of the town of Orange. No temporary sign shall obstruct or impair a public sidewalk, public or private street, or driveway, traffic control sign, fire hydrant, or otherwise create a hazard to public safety. Temporary construction signs shall be designed to be stable under all weather conditions, including high winds. Here we have the same wording that we had, or similar wording. Temporary construction signs determined to be in violation of 383-190B 3, 4, and 5 by town officials are subject to removal by the town without notice. And development and construction signs may not be displayed until after the issuance of a building permit, and must be removed within 24 hours after the issuance of a CEO, certificate of occupancy.
On number 7, would you contemplate, for example, like a Springbrook Common, the CO may be issued on unit number 1, but not unit number 10, so the final certificate of occupancy?
That's a good point. So we could put final.
Final could be a long time. So they got temporaries. Well, I'm just saying.
Yeah, okay.
A temporary CO could be. No? Okay.
So should we add the word final, or?
If you don't address the issue, you have a number of units, and the intent is going to be unclear.
Okay, so the final.
For the final unit, the final certificate of occupancy issued in that complex. The language we can tinker with, but the main thing is we address the concept.
Okay. Go ahead, Paul.
Technically, after the issuance of the first CO, it's not under construction anymore. They may not have finished the interior units, but you should change over to a real estate sign. I mean, there's no ability.
Yeah.
You mean after the CO is issued on number 1, it's only going to be issued if the rest of the units
Well, what I'm saying is an inspection is made of the site, and the site's complete. I mean, there's parking spaces down, there's,
It wouldn't be a certificate of occupancy issued for unit number 1 until certain things are done.
that's correct. And
Okay.
once those are completed, what I'm saying is, it really doesn't become it's not a construction issue anymore, it's really a rental issue, and then it's covered by our real estate side.
How about I'm just questioning a little further, because I think I'm on board with you that the parking is all done, okay? The exterior of the units is all done, and it's just the interior of the units that needs to be CO'd. Okay, that's fine. So then it should go to a real estate sign, and I think your language is fine.
Okay. Okay, are there any issues that we missed here or think we should add to this? Paul?
No, my only comment is again to maybe once this is redrafted, to get a copy to Vinnie and get a copy to the building inspector.
How about to our friend Brian?
That was what I was going to propose, that I make the changes that we've addressed here. I'll send emails out to all the commission members to make sure that I did them correctly. When I get responses back from everybody else, then I'll forward them to the town attorney and to Mr. Miller and the building inspector as well. Okay. And then hopefully we'll have something a little bit more solid, and we can maybe move forward at our next meeting to send it out to the public notice and schedule a public hearing.
Is this something that Paul Grimmer would want to,
Paul Grimmer has given me,
comment on, or
he
has
did
he
comment
seen
on
it?
it,
Okay.
and he hasn't seen this. I will send this out to Paul though as well. Good idea. Paul Grimmer. He did comment on this, send me a couple of notices on his thoughts on it, and I've incorporated some of his ideas in this.
How about when a commercial place wants to get like a radio place out there to advertise? You know, they put up a little booth. You know,
We have
is that under
outdoor-
here?
Advertising.
Like a promotion, like
A
with radio
promotion, like a
station.
radio. They say, you know, come on down to this site.
The commission has instituted a policy for outdoor display, and you're able to do that, I think, twice a year, and the process involves the posting of a certificate of insurance, the landlord's permission, a site plan of where the tent is going to go, or outdoor display, approval of the fire marshal, and approval of the building inspector.
Right. And any signage related to that would have to come before us, in the permit fee or process. Any other suggestions or?
No, but just given the nature of what we talked about earlier today, or maybe or earlier tonight, or maybe I saw it on television while I was late. The person who's wearing the sandwich board sign, the Liberty, that would be permitted here under a temporary analysis? I'm just trying to fit that in, because that's
No, I don't think so.
No, because he's 12 feet within the
He's
right away.
within the roadway, exactly, he's within the roadway. There was some
Might
language
be
in
not
here
be
about it.
sufficiently structurally sound,
Yeah.
blow away in a wind. It's a heavier
Yeah,
wind.
I still don't, I don't see how that would come into compliance. You know, like Ozzy said, he's not structurally sound.
It moves.
Quite frankly, you've got to wonder about a lot of other soundness issues if somebody's standing out there in a Statue of Liberty costume. So I think that completes tonight's agenda.
I move that we adjourn.
Any
I'll
second that
the
motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Meeting adjourned at 10:45.